Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World. I'm your host, as always, Kane Sims. Uh, Maybe with COVID, although I don't think I do have COVID. I have tested myself twice over the last 2 days, and it is negative. But you can obviously tell, probably by the sound of my voice, that things are not necessarily hunky dory. But I'm all right. We're cracking on. It's all good in the proverbial hood. So before we begin today's conversation with Lisa Michaud, it's going to be an epic conversation because we're going to be talking about enterprise conversational AI challenges. Lisa works at Interactions, and Interactions is literally a global provider of voice AI and conversational AI capabilities to organizations all over the world. And we're going to be talking about some of the top enterprise AI adoption challenges, implementation challenges, and some of the ways in which organizations are finding success. So we'll get to that in one moment. But first, a shout out to our presenting sponsors, Deepgram and Symbl.ai. Symbl.ai is industry leading conversational intelligence capabilities. With its APIs, developers can build a whole manner of conversational intelligence applications. You can get to data within conversations that you didn't even know existed. And so, let's say, for example, if you wanted to use it in your call center, you can do things like topic summarization, you can do things like speaker diarization, you can do quality assurance, you can work out whether certain things were said or not said for QA and compliance. You can do a whole bunch of stuff around outbound dial-ins. You can actually build your own agent assist capabilities using Symbl.ai. The possibilities are absolutely endless, and it is literally limited by your imagination. So do check out Symbl.ai if you want to learn more about that. That's SYMBL.ai. Our second presenting sponsor is Deepgram. Deepgram is one of the industry-leading speech recognition providers. If you're building voice bots and voice assistants, whether you're working in call centers, whether you're working in apps or voice enabling websites, whatever the case may be, voice enabling devices, then Deepgram is the go-to place I would recommend for your speech recognition services. Most speech recognition services that you get, you can't really do anything with them once you use it. It's kind of just out of the box. Whereas with Deepgram, you can retrain your speech recognition models for your specific use cases in your specific industry and your specific company products and services, which means that you feed the best possible data into your natural language understanding engine. If the speech recognition doesn't work, you're giving your natural language understanding engine rubbish. And so get the first part right by using Deepgram. You can check out more at deepgram.com/VUX world. That is deepgram.com/VUX world. Two more things to tell you about before we crack on. We are partnering with Deepgram on a webinar at the end of this month on the 22nd of March. It's actually in a few days' time. And we're going to be talking about how to bring about the end of voice bots saying, "Can you repeat that?" It's one of the most frustrating things that users face when they talk to a voice assistant or they call a contact center and the bot doesn't understand a word that they're saying. So we're going to be diving into some of the best practice for creating highly successful conversational AI. We're joined by Deepgram CEO Scott Stevenson and also Illyrian CEO Dion Milson, and we're going to be climbing into how organizations can build successful voice applications. The link to that webinar will be in the show notes, and I will also put the link to that down here. Oh no, failed to post that comment. I'll put the link in LinkedIn now if it works. There you go. And it'll be on YouTube, and it will be also on the show notes when you get to it. The second thing we're going to do is at the end of this month, I'll be speaking at an audio codes webinar, and we'll be talking about how to implement voice AI capabilities into any call center. One of the places that people struggle with, and one of the biggest stumbling blocks, we might even get into a little bit of that when we bring Lisa on in just a moment. The biggest stumbling blocks is how to take the bots that you've built, the assistant that you've built, and actually integrate it into a call center. Lots of different call center providers, lots of different ways of doing it, and no one size fits all solution until now. Audio codes have got an immense release coming up on the 29th of March, which we're going to be talking about. I'm going to be doing a talk around how you can align your strategy successfully and set yourself up for success. And Ilan Avner of Audio Codes is going to be showing you basically how you can integrate any bot that you might have into any contact center system. And so the link to that webinar is down here as well. I'll put that in the show notes, and I'll put it on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Now, without further ado, let's get to the main event today, which is a conversation with Lisa Michaud, who is the product director at Interactions. Lisa, welcome.
Hi, Kane.
How's it going?
It's going well. Better for me, perhaps, than you. I didn't realize that you hadn't been feeling well.
Yeah. I masked it fairly well. Usually my mumbles sound like this anyway, but it's a little bit more mumbly today because yeah. So I don't know if it's a cold or something like that, but yeah. Anyway.
Well, I guess we're practicing the ultimate social distancing here.
Yeah, yeah.
The entire ocean in between us. So
I think we're good. I think we're good. Cool. So Steve Warswick actually. Shout out to Steve. Steve is the creator of Mitsuku, which is one of the best conversational agents around. I don't know if you're familiar with Mitsuku, Lisa, but it is been going for a long time. Is incredibly good. And he said early today, Kane. I thought these sessions were normally around 5 p.m. Kind of are. But we are always accommodating. And when we're speaking to people who are overseas and in different areas, when we can flex and do as we will. So here we are, a little bit earlier than planned or earlier than usual, but delighted to get into this conversation with you, Lisa.
and I'm thankful that there's somebody who could recognize that it's not the right time and manage to join aboard anyway.
Yeah. Nice one. Shout out to Steve. So, Lisa, tell us a bit about yourself then. Tell us a bit about yourself and interactions for those that are not familiar with yourself and with the company.
Well, I'll start with myself in that I have been working in the conversational AI space in contact centers for the past 7 years. Before that was actually I come into it from the science perspective in that I'm a former academic. I used to be a computer science professor, and I used to do research in natural language processing. So I've always had a fascination around human language and how we process those languages in an automated fashion. And that is one of the reasons why I got very excited when I was transitioning to Interactions as a company, because I really loved the way they approach that problem. Interactions has been around for more than 15 years at this point in the contact center space. Traditionally, a voice company. So traditionally operating in the voice channel, but that is definitely evolving and is exploding as everyone is embracing their digital transformations. Um, and we are a company that both provides our own conversational AI stack, so our own speech recognition, our own natural language understanding, and our own engine for building and executing bots or conversational virtual assistants. And we also have a very large professional services arm. So we are a complete managed service at this time where our customers are coming to us as the experts in that conversational AI space to build that virtual assistant for them to run on our platforms. So
Mm, nice. So it's a fully managed service. So as a client, then it would be a case of, if I was whoever I was, let's say I'm a bank or insurance company or whoever, you essentially it's almost like outsourcing that kind of conversational capabilities to interactions. You kind of do the design, development, implementation, the ongoing maintenance, management, the whole 9 yards. Is that right?
absolutely, it's a long relationship. We build a very deep relationship with our clients. So every single time we start out with trying to figure out what their problems are, where their pain points are, and what are the best situations that we can provide automation for in terms of creating a self-service flow that can work with their with whatever their particular needs are. And like I said, we bring this very, very deep set of expertise within the center. We have a huge branch of the professional services group, which are conversational designers, and they are really great at how do we create those effortless conversational experiences. And we work with them to create the dialogue flows, to create, determine which are the use cases that would get the best ROI for automation. And then we create that. We also have the application developers who do all that back end integration and hook into their back office. And then we have those long relationships with them where it's not just we create a bot for them and hand it over. It is running on our system, but it's also more than that, because every one of those virtual assistants is always in evolution. So we always have the one version of it that's taking calls today, and then we're working on the next version of it as soon as that one goes out the door. And we have people who have been with us from the beginning. We have customers who have more than a 15-year history with us, and we are still working on their virtual assistants. And as I said, a lot of our clients are facing questions of digital transformation right now. And Our IVA, our virtual assistant platform, is omni-channel. We are offering multiple text channels as well as the voice channel at this point. So we are engaging with a lot of our clients as they are looking into expanding the way their customers can talk to them into other channels. We are providing that, and it's the same platform, the same natural language understanding that can, have a conversation in Facebook Messenger or an SMS or in a web chat that's embedded on their website, um, and working on breaking down those silos so that they don't have to deal with a different vendor for each channel. They can deal with one vendor, and then that context can be maintained. So we can know, hey, you talked to you talked to the brand in this other channel 2 days ago, and we can remember that information and leverage it in the conversation when they reach out in a different channel the next day.
Interesting. And what about your role then? So you mentioned there's conversation designers, there'll be developers. I'm imagining there's analysts and stuff like that. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into all this lot. So to explain a little bit about your role and what you do at Interactions.
I sometimes make the joke that it takes a village to bring these applications
Yeah.
to life. Yeah, so I work in product, and I have a few different hats that I wear within product. One of the primary hats I wear is my engagement around the environment that we use for creating applications. So like I said, we have our own technology stack top to bottom, and that includes the development environment that our designers and our application developers use to create those applications, and the platform on which they run. That has been under my under my purview for the last couple of years as we evolve that and we add more capabilities that we want the virtual assistant to be able to do. We also have to figure out, how do we author those, and how do we make it as effortless for users to author as it is for people to speak with. And then another one of my hats is the omni-channel offering. So as we start to expand beyond voice and we build these integrations to all of these different text channels, that's also something that I oversee. So I like to say that from a product perspective, my job is, in often cases, to be the glue that sits in between all of these different groups. So I work very closely with our engineers, I work with our researchers, I work with our application developers and designers, I work with our clients, and I get to shift gears all the time to bring those different people together and get them talking about what it is that we really want, where we want to go with the platform and with the authoring environment, so that we can continue to bring more and more interesting capabilities to those conversations. And that's why I consider myself very lucky that I come to it from a background where I also understand the science. And again, so I can talk to the researchers as PhD to PhD. Sometimes we can get into the science of how it is that we process. How do we understand? How does our natural language understanding work? And I guess I mentioned that earlier and then dropped the thread. One of the things that got me very excited about interactions when I first learned about them is that one of the challenges for natural language understanding and for building a bot is that chicken and egg problem. You need data to train a classifier to understand intent, right? That's at the most basic level. The biggest task a bot needs to do is understand what it is that this person is trying to accomplish, and to classify that so that the bot can then get that done for them. And you need data to train a good classifier, but until you have the bot, you don't really have real data. Right? If a conversational designer sits down and says, I want to train this intent, and I'm going to come up with 5 to 10 utterances that represent that intent, that's not real data for 2 different reasons. One, it's tiny, and real AI is a big data problem. And 5 to 10 utterances is not even small data, that's like nanoparticles. And the other problem is that the way the person who's building a bot is thinking of those utterances is not necessarily the way that the target audience would express that. They're not actually trying to get that accomplished, and they're not necessarily even part of that target audience. They might be, they may be of the completely different area with different linguistic patterns. I mean, it's, it's not necessarily going to be, even that small amount of data, a good representative set. So you see a lot of systems that they're early on, the early days of deployment, they have a very, very low understanding rate, very high rate of no match. And like you said, for your title for that upcoming thing about, can you repeat that? Those dreaded no match responses are really, really difficult. And then you're basically forcing the user to try and figure out how to speak in some way that is more in alignment with that small amount of data, that it wasn't representing them. And the way we do it at interactions is we realize that's a bad experience, and we don't want to have, even on day one, for the virtual assistant to be performing at that level. So we have real-time human backup, where we have these banks of human intent analysts who are not agents. They are not part of the conversation, but they can be there if the bot needs to phone a friend. If the bot says, I've got a very low level of confidence in classifying this utterance and figuring out what its intent is. So I need a little bit of help from human intelligence. And so these real-time helpers can just either read if it's a text channel utterance, or hear the what's being said by this particular user, and just be able to quickly classify within a second or two which intent is this. So those intent analysts literally they know they're in a certain application. These are the possible intents that this application can classify. All they need to do is use that human intellect for just a second to solve that problem for the bot, which allows that the bots to perform at a much higher level. It doesn't make believe that we can really train a robust intent classifier on small data. We can train a decent classifier on small data these days. But for that very large percentage where it wouldn't cover it, we've got that human backup. As far as the user experience is concerned, it's all behind the scenes. The bot, the virtual assistant, responds right away with the correct, response, and the conversation continues. And along the way, we're building up that data. We're building up classified data that was classified by a human annotation person in real time, and that can be folded back into the AI. And so we get that very quick feedback loop, which then allows that AI to get stronger and stronger very quickly, and the reliance on the human backup to decrease. So we call that human assisted understanding. It's one of the unique things about interactions, and it's one of the things that I liked, because as a scientist, when I was hearing, when I hear people say, "Oh, just put in 5 examples and click train, and you've got an intent classifier," it's like, no.
No. And the fact that I think you nailed both of them actually. The fact that it's just purely based on assumptions, and it's very difficult to design a conversation when you've only got one half of the conversation there. You don't have the partner with you. It's virtually impossible, and no, you can't ever get to the breadth and scope that the real way that actual people speak. I think that whole idea of having a human backup is absolutely amazing. I've never actually heard of that before, I don't think, from any other provider.
Either.
Yeah, I mean,
It also gets it to the idea that, like I said, in terms of the target user population, let's suppose this is a utility company in Texas, and all of the callers have have a really rich Texan accent, or just their speech patterns or the terminology. I mean, I come from the Boston area, so there's certain words in my vocabulary that are very unique to this area. For example, I will say that I'm thirsty, so I need to go find a bubbler.
right.
And
Bubbler.
a bubbler, yeah. So the
What's a
water
bubbler?
fountain.
Water
And I
fountain.
think,
All right.
yeah, so New England, like what Southern New England is pretty much the only time you're going to hear that word. And there's other terminology like that are unique to the area. And so if we build models based on not just on people who have the designer who's guessed a few examples, or another option, people can crowdsource it, right? There are companies that will provide data for you. but that data may not, even if you do that and you source that data from them, that might not represent the way the people in this particular Texas community will actually express those phrases. So you're building it on that user community, you're getting that feedback right away. And so we're building these classification models that are very specific to that task and the terminology that they bring to that task.
Mm. Is it though? Is that what the human in the loop helps with, or is that something that you would do separately? The whole kind of like building a model based on the specific dialects of a locale. For example, you're working with I know, a local credit union in one state. Is do you is that what the humans are used for? Is to try and build around that kind of like language model for that specific location, or do you do something else to do that?
Well, the humans are used for both, but I mean, the humans, the primary purpose of them is in the moment to make certain that the conversation continues. And then the second purpose is they provide that data, and then we build a model for that company. So we are not, while we do have lots of generic data and we can provide generic models for all sorts of things, like if we want to do something like pay my bill, I want to pay my bill, or I want to check my balance. There's a lot of things that are customer service intense that we can build generic models for, but we also do, as part of the managed service, we train models for that particular application based on their particular users as we get that tagged annotated data from the intent analysts, and we pull that back in, and that becomes part of how we power the models for that customer and that application.
Right.
And I know I saw someone actually commented on that on the chat stream there. It's not just that, the companies don't need to do anything, and you're right. I mean, annotating data, like if you have a chatbot and you want to review all of the no matches and then hand annotate it and then feed that back in, that's an incredibly time consuming task. Training that data with human annotation is expensive and time consuming, and that is part of the service that we provide.
Interesting. Got another comment here from Richard. I won't bring it up because it's quite long. Comment only. I really like the human assisted understanding feature. It creates what is sometimes called a cobot scenario, voice assistants, RVR, and the like. Doesn't need to be human versus bot model. This breaks it in a new and interesting way. Getting this right will be key step ahead for the industry. So there you go. You're trailblazing there, Lisa.
Thank you. And then we also have another way in which we're blending human and AI. So there are situations where there are tasks which the AI can't do. Like one of the things that we try to do is try to create these self-service situations, because nobody wants to sit and wait online for a very long time to get to a human being, right? So that they can get a task done. People have shown in lots and lots of surveys that they are perfectly willing to talk to a bot if it gets their tasks done. They don't want to talk to a bot, or the dreaded letters IVR, right? If it means frustration and having to repeat themselves and having to press numbers as they go through a DTMF set of menus. But if it gets themselves the job done, then they're perfectly happy to stay in that automation. But sometimes you can't automate the entire thing. Sometimes it's because there isn't an API for the back office work. So for some reason either they haven't developed one or they can't. For some kind of regulation, a human being has to look at this task. Sometimes it's just a judgment call. It's something that is not something you can build a bunch of algorithms around to decide. So we have also created this framework called task orchestration, which allows for the bot to basically delegate a task to a human being. And it's a little bit like a supersizing on the idea of the intent analyst, who is only taking a second or two to classify an intent. This human being might be taking a little more than a second, but they are going to approve the refund, which is just something that company just does not want to do with algorithms. They don't want to have an automation around approving a refund. They want a human being to set eyes on the situation, say, yes, this is a situation that qualifies. And again, they're not necessarily jumping into the conversation themselves, they're just doing that task. So the bot is working together with the human being for things that humans can do or humans need to do. And the conversation can still be mostly automated. There's also flavors of task orchestration where the human being will step into the conversation for a little while. But it won't be a straight up escalation. It won't just be, okay, I can't handle the situation. I need to hand it over. It's, hey, I'm going to bring in a friend. I'm going to bring in a human to help out for the conversation a little bit. And then that human can step out and we can get back to the automation. So again, taking that load off of the human agents, which allows for decreased wait times and, increased efficiency because we're not waiting for the next available agent all the time.
It's a really unique concept of this whole kind of like, because people say like human in the loop is a kind of phrase, and people talk about like humans and bots working together and stuff like that. But most of the time, it's kind of like there's definitely a handoff, isn't there? It's the bot that either fails and hands over to a live agent, or it's the bot that purposefully hands over to a live agent at the right time. Let's say you want to do something that requires authentication or whatever. The bot might gather some information first, escalate you to a human that can then finish it off or whatever. And even on the agent assist side, where you've got a kind of an assistant that's there listening to both ends of the call, suggesting to an agent what like a next best action or whatever might be, it's still kind of like, I mean, in those instances, you get the agents who will say, no, that's not right. And they can help to kind of train the model, but there's not this blend of like a customer facing automated interaction that turns into a live conversation with a human that then turns back into an automated interaction. It's a
Right.
really unique way of like, that's actually properly blending human and AI together.
Right. It's a partnership. And the reality is, trying to leverage what each side is best at. Just as, and I'm going to take advantage of this moment to make a segue, like the idea of the channels, because, we were talking a lot about voice and stuff. The conversations happen in different channels. And also recognizing that there are times when other channels is like, this is what this channel is best at. And one of the things that we were discovering in some of our recent usability tests is people really like the idea of moving out of the voice channel for collecting certain data. Because for me, one of the things I absolutely hate when I'm even in a face-to-face conversation, I'm making a purchase, and they ask, well, would you like to have your receipt emailed to you? And then I have to tell them my email address. Because verbally expressing an email address and making that completely unambiguous so they get it right is very hard. I love it when they have a little keypad and they just turn around to me and they say, can you enter your email address? So now we've shifted channels, right? Because we've basically gone from a voice channel into a text channel. And we've found that users really respond to that. Instead of having the frustration of giving certain information verbally, which is hard to get um, unambiguously communicated, why not augment the voice communication with a text communication and be able to fill in that information so that they're signing up for a new service. They need to provide their email address and a couple of other things. Why not provide that via texting? Particularly if they're on a smartphone, they're talking, they don't have to stop talking. We're not shifting the conversation entirely to a different channel. We're just leveraging that other channel to provide that information and then continuing the verbal conversation. Because there are certain things that are faster speaking, and there are other things that are easier texting.
Yeah.
So to use the channels for what they're good at.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And because also you've got like speech technology in general isn't always great at some things either, is it? Postcodes and letters and numbers and stuff can be really dodgy. Email addresses are notoriously dodgy. Even names are really dodgy because, spelling of names, for example, Michaud, your name is pronounced Michaud, but if you said that to a speech recognition engine, I'm sure you would get not something that's spelled how it should be spelled.
I mean, even if I spoke to a human being, like we were just talking before the show,
Mm.
there's so many different ways that the French spell the sound O, that even if I was speaking to a native French speaker, they could come up with 10 different ways of spelling the end of my name. So whether it was AUX, AULT, OT, um, always involving some consonant that's ignored at the end. But because there's so many different ways, you can't just say it. You have to say it and spell it. And even when you spell it in the voice channel, there's so many letters that the difference between those letters sound wise are so subtle because of the lack of fidelity when we're talking over phone, that you end up having to say things like, like I want to do my middle initial and I say N. N versus M is hard to make out. So I always say N is in Nancy, that
Yeah,
you
yeah.
always have to do that. So yeah, there's certain challenges that for the speech, for that vocal distinctiveness and getting those things across, and it just becomes more efficient to leverage another channel for that. And then of course you also want to just recognize that it's not just what different channels are good at, there's also what people prefer.
Mm.
So, we're in an interesting generational shift um, where certain surveys have found that baby boomers are still very, very attached to the voice channels, and millennials are very, very attached to the text channels, and we Gen Xers are in the between and can go either way. We're not, actually don't show up in the survey at all, which I just think is stereotypical. We're the ignored generation, but I think my peers and I, we fall in different ways. I personally will always approach a customer service interaction in text first.
Mm.
I hate calling people. So so I will always reach out on the web first and see if I can get that done. And one of the challenges is that, like I said before about silos, right? A lot of brands have different things available on the different channels, and so I've reached out in the web channel, and I've found that that's very, very limited what they have on the web chat, and I have to go to voice. And what we
Mm.
really want to do is to empower brands to say, however it is that your customer wants to reach out to you, that's an optimal experience for them if they can get their task done in that channel. So instead of having just a simplistic chatbot on the web channel that can only do a Wizmo request, they can only do why where's my order request, right?
Mm.
Um, Being able to attach the same self-service flows that are available in other channels to where it is that your customers want to reach out to you empowers those customers to get things done in the channels that they find most comfortable.
Mm. Yeah. It's interesting because one of the challenges around that, if you don't have a setup like interactions, is that it's hard enough to develop a self-service conversational solution on one channel, and introducing another channel that needs to keep parity with the context of the current channel is a bit of a challenge. So, for example, you're on a call, you're in the middle of a conversation, and the assistant says, "I'm just going to send you a text. If you want to subscribe, can you just respond with your email address?" Have you got the text? Yes, I have. Okay, well, I've just responded. Okay, cool. And all of a sudden, you're kind of like, dealing with some kind of like dialogue that's almost like holding dialogue while the user goes and does the other thing. And so I can imagine that being a bit of a challenge for organizations who are just starting to get their head around automating the live chat conversations they have on their website, or introducing an automated SMS. Where would you advise that kind of organizations begin their journey? Do you think that some use cases purely and simply actually would benefit from having this kind of like multi-channel approach from the very beginning, or is it a case of beginning with one channel and iterating over time? Because it can be, for those who've never done it before, it can seem like there's a lot of moving parts. Like, what would your general advice be to how to begin the process of going down this kind of like omni-channel conversational route?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that there's a lot of moving parts, and I think that, you don't wanna boil the ocean. You don't want to try to do everything all at once, particularly if you haven't done a lot of exploration as to what it is your customers want. I'm always somebody who recommends that you start relatively small and you learn. If that sometimes it's just a matter of opening up a channel and listening to what your users are trying to do on that channel, but not putting any automation there yet. Just finding out what they're going to that channel for. Um, but in terms of use cases that, to go back to the part of your question where you're talking about use cases that can really work well with leveraging multiple channels. And I think part of that is recognizing again, where certain channels are best. And there's been a lot of learnings on that. If you work with people who have that deep expertise in design, and they know what are the kinds of things that work best in a visual medium versus a auditory medium. So, the example of collecting data is one example. Another example is presenting data. So if I were a scheduling application and I have 5 different options to present to you on possible possible appointments that that you might be interested in taking, right? That is not a good thing for me to present to you verbally, because if you're listening to it, you cannot hold all 5 options in your memory and consider and weigh the possibilities and figure out, okay, I could do that one if I get my spouse to pick up the kids. You know, it's there's a lot of things to think about when you're trying to choose an appointment. What you want is something that has permanence. You want a visual display of those possibilities while you're thinking. So that's another use case that we've talked about with our people is in our clients is presenting, shifting to the text channel to send data that then has a permanence and they can look at and think about for a while. But choosing which one of those is still something that you probably want to do like verbally, just say, oh yeah, the Wednesday appointment is the best one. So it's leveraging that expertise and people who have done explorations around what it means to leverage both of those channels. And then also in general, to recognize that you're not copying and pasting an experience. So you're not saying, okay, I want to go into the web channel and I'm going to take everything that we've worked on to build this virtual assistant in my contact center, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to copy and paste it into the web channel and make it work that way, because the flows are going to be slightly different. The use cases are going to be different. People may come to that web page with different tasks in mind, and the tasks in a web chat are often going to be in the context of what web page they're on. And so you need to be able to recognize that some of that material can be shared and some of it's going to be very unique to that channel. So this sort of segues into the idea that, like I said, about leveraging deep experience. And one of the things about providing a managed service is when people are getting into that and they're getting into this idea of digital transformation, they don't have to invent the wheel. They don't have to have expertise in-house. They can, use a company like mine as the consultants and the experts and the subject matter experts who are going to bring that knowledge and say, we can guide you in that transformation. So it's in steps. Don't try to, pull everything over and do everything all at once, but start with one thing, add some more stuff, learn from what your customers are doing and what they're trying to do, and bring more automation and more conversational experiences as we collect that, what they're trying to do and what would get you the best ROI.
Interesting. I suppose one of the other benefits around that whole managed service option is that you can potentially benefit from other clients. So, for example, we had Brian Jefferson on yesterday, who is the director of contact center operations at Landry. Landry, you might be more familiar with that than I was, to be honest, because it's a US-based company that's got, like, I think Bubblegum Shrimp and a bunch of other restaurants and casinos and hotels and stuff like that. They were automating their call center and went for a managed service option as well, and were able to deploy it within 30 days because the company already had some knowledge around, appointment booking and, in that kind of domain. So I imagine one of the benefits would be that, let's say, interactions and a bunch of clients that you have in one domain area, another client who has a similar kind of use case, similar industry, can benefit from that kind of like language model and classifier. Is that part of the value? Have you got a specific domain focus sort of thing, or do you tend to work
Right.
with a
I
bunch
mean,
of
there's
industries?
we have the idea of verticalization and we have the idea of sort of horizontal. There are verticals and horizontals. So a great example of a vertical that allowed us to do a lot of pre-built content that allows you to deploy relatively quickly is the collections, the financial collections vertical, because the reality is that these conversations are all pretty much the same the same kind of flow. And almost all of these collection companies use the same back office technology. So you build out that integration once and you've got that in your pocket to use. So so we have that ability to create a sort of prototypical what a conversation in this particular vertical would look like, and reuse that content and make that a faster process. And of course, it also depends on the individual. It depends on the client, because the more time you take, the more we can customize it to your particular things. So I think it's the there's a lot of different models involved. There's the model of picking the suit off the rack and paying for it and walking home. And then at the other end of the spectrum, it's the going to the tailors, getting yourself measured, and having a suit tailor made for you from raw cloth. And there's flavors in between, right? So the latter one, the raw, starting with the tailored, bespoke suit, is a much longer process because we have to know that client. And that's going to take a long time to create, but it's going to make you look good. One off the rack is going to be cheaper and faster. It's not going to have that same wow factor. And so, you choose what you want in between. But so the verticals are like, insurance companies and banks and collections companies and utilities companies. But there's also these horizontals like scheduling. So scheduling is a use case, and it could go in a lot of different verticals. But you're right. One of the things that happens once you have this long experience, and you've worked with so many different companies in different fields, is you've built out what the best practices are for this particular use case. And then you have basically a template. You have a component that you can reuse as a genericized component that represents a really effective appointment scheduling flow. So yeah, that is also
interesting. So I mentioned there that the Landry's use case deployed in about 30 days. If you look at other kind of providers, I think Core AI on their website and Casisto and stuff like that, they have like deployable within 30 days. Whether it's true or not in reality, depending on the infrastructure the organization has, who knows? But there is, needless to say, there is some organizations that are, I suppose, playing on this quick deployment option, which I'm sure interactions can do in use cases where you've got domain expertise and knowledge and stuff like that. Let's say there's a brand new client in a brand new industry that you've never kind of like worked with before. You mentioned there you have to like really get to know the client. It takes a long time to make a tailor-made suit. What do you think, broadly speaking, those kind of timings are? Like how long would a typical like brand new industry take, do you think, to bring to life
I think
that tailor-made suit?
I don't want to speak for our professional services people who are the actual experts on that, but I think it really does depend on the customer in that particular case, because now we typically do have multi-month engagements for that first thing. That's part of, because we do a lot of discovery, and the more you know about them, the better that first draft is going to be. Because what you really want to do, for example, is you really want to study what are the intents that these people are going to come, are your clients or your customers are coming to you with, and what are the best ones to automate. And if you don't have some data on that, you want to collect that data. And the reason why you want to collect that data is we don't want to spend a whole lot of time building out intents that aren't going to be used. Building out flows. So I did an experience once where I worked with a customer where they sort of did educated guesses on what use cases they wanted to build out. And in the first 2 months of interaction with that particular bot, half of the things that were built out were never even invoked. And half of the things that people came to the bot with hadn't been part of that draft. And it was a wonderful case study in why you need to have that information, why you need to have that discovery phase, and to really learn about what to build. And the other thing that is a sort of a long pole in the tent is integrations into the back office. So people are always talking to me about how particularly if someone has not built a lot of automation and self-service around certain tasks in the past, the client themselves need to provide the hooks into their back office to get these tasks done. And that may mean building hooks that haven't ever existed, which is a dependence on becomes a dependent on the client to build and then debug those API calls. And so that, which is something that doesn't even necessarily fall into the purview of the person building the application, can delay things significantly as we work on what those API calls are going to be, what they're going to accomplish, and build the integration around that. So it's one of the biggest challenges, and that can delay the launch significantly. So it's hard to say, but I don't think we typically do a from beginning to end in 30 days, because we don't typically offer the suit that's off the rack. We're usually more in the middle of the suit analogy, and towards the bespoke suit. But what's interesting is we do have more and more clients who want to have more ownership. So we are also simultaneously evolving towards, how can we work, just as we're very much about our technology being a partnership of the human and the automation. How do we work with our clients so that the creation of an application becomes more of a partnership between who they have on staff and who they want to own some of that development, and they own some of that creation and our expertise. So that we can move in a direction of giving them more and more direct ownership of the process, if that's what they want. In many cases, DIY is not what people want. They don't want to have to staff those expertises.
Yeah, I think it's horses for courses, I think, isn't it, at the minute? I'm noticing that you've got some organizations on the kind of like bigger scale, like some of the big banks and stuff like that in the US and even in the UK to some degree, where having kind of like ownership over it and having a whole team, Swisscom and stuff like that, Mercedes and companies like that who are doing things like, having ownership over their experience with a customized voice and, bespoke technology sets and stuff like that. And they're getting, a good amount of talent exists in those teams. I think that those organizations want to have kind of like ultimate control over their customer experience and whatnot. But then you've got organizations, even still big organizations, but they just do not have the resources or the capacity, and maybe even can't actually get hold of the resources even if they want to. It's not as if everybody's a walking kind of like conversational AI engineer or conversation designer at this minute, So I think it's horses for courses, but I think that definitely I'm noticing that some companies are wanting some degree of control. But there's a fine balance, isn't there, between offering kind of like carte blanche access to some fairly sophisticated technology that has taken a long time and a lot of very smart people with very specific skills to create, and then putting that in the hands of organizations that may not have that same level of skill. So I think that idea of partnering, as you mentioned there, is probably a good spot to be, where you've got the expertise and the kind of skill sets within interactions, and you're able to kind of almost, I don't want to say train, but it's almost like a collaboration, and then you can help the organization be empowered to, make certain changes or whatever over time, and help them develop their maturity, basically.
Exactly. And I mean, like you said, there's sometimes they can't staff it. Sometimes they just don't want to staff those expertises. And also there's so many different skills that are part of creating a conversational experience. So, we have, as I mentioned before, we have two different teams. We have the team that is the conversational design team that works on the experience, and we have the application development team that works on all that back office integration. But that's only two spheres, but that at the very least, I would say, was the minimum set, because you can't really come to this task if you're talking about building something more than a simple hello world bot. You can't come to that task without skills that cover both spheres. You have to be able to understand what makes a good experience, And that has to be you have to be somebody who knows how to put together and craft a dialogue, and to
Mhm.
create that dialogue in a way that isn't going to break people's brains when they try to converse with it. But there's no, the folks who talk about low code, no code, it's like, well, yeah, in a low code, no code environment, you can do a lot of things conversationally, but can you do things that are part of a real enterprise virtual assistant that can do all of these complicated self-service, these real life self-service flows that involve the manipulation of data and the integration into these databases, because that's that's not trivial.
Mhm. Yeah.
That somewhere along the line you're going to have to throw some code in there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, how multifaceted it is. You've got, the conversation design at one part to make the interaction a good interaction for the user. You've got the kind of like technology in the middle, which is all around the language classification and the context management and all that kind of stuff. Then you've got the integration into line of business systems and data sources and all that kind of stuff. It's like some organizations just struggle with that final bit. That's why some of them don't have self-service options in many channels, is because it's actually pretty hard to do. And now
Right.
you're adding a new layer of technology and a new design practice on the front of it, which can be quite a challenge. Um, I think that some of the conversations that maybe is that you're particularly not having, given that you're more on the kind of product side, but certainly maybe the professional services team is likely having, is you're gonna have clients who really don't understand anything about it, and to be honest, don't really care. As I said, the conversation I had with Brian yesterday was such a really good insight into how some organizations are thinking about this, which is, I've got a problem in the contact center. I can't recruit for it. I just want a problem solving, and it's bound to be cost effective because it's costing me a lot anyway, and so I just need a solution. And there's no real. I don't really care how it works necessarily, as long as it's good. Then you're going to have kind of like other clients who are a little bit more educated, but maybe reading into some of the hype that you see around AI and this kind of like, I don't know, black box that's able to answer everything and do everything, and maybe is having inflated expectations and stuff like that. I wonder how you might kind of like um what your advice would be on, for a client. Let's say there's a potential client tuning in, thinking about this kind of automation efforts. What would your kind of advice be to that client around how to manage their expectations around either how long this might take or how complex it might be, or all of those kind of things? Like, what are some of the sort of like key messages that you would say from a maybe as an expectation management point of view?
No, that's a good question, and, there's a part of me that says, like, the first thing that popped into my head is, is AI is not a magic wand.
Mm,
You can't just dump a whole bunch of data into a black box and have a bot. It doesn't quite work that way. It is magical. There are some amazing things that we can do with AI at every single year that increases and that deepens, and that's not a pun on deep neural networks, but but um but it isn't something that you can just just dump stuff in, press a button, and you get something out. Like some 1940s, 1950s science fiction story where there's the machine that you press a button and your entire meal just slides out on a plate with all the different dishes that are all cooked together and placed on your plate for you. Um, we're just like we don't all wear silver lame and we don't all have jetpacks that we use to get to work. There are things about the 1950s portrayal of the future that aren't real. Um, it takes time, and the if you don't take the time to really, like I said, do the discovery of what your virtual assistant needs to be able to do, then you're not going to get the result you want. And so it takes time, it takes investment, and human beings are going to be a huge part of it. Human intellect, for that from that design perspective, that's going to be a huge part of it. That that process of a human being bringing their creativity to the table is going to be a huge part of that process, and just recognizing that it's not, it's not just a box where you press a button.
Although we were talking about Spider-Man before this, Spider-Man would have you believe that it kind of is. I don't know if you've seen or if anyone has seen one of the more recent films where he puts these sunglasses on and he's got this assistant called Edith. And yeah, some of the things he talks to Edith about is like just absolutely unbelievable.
Until we have Tony Stark actually building virtual assistants, building the platforms that we execute on, I don't think that's going to quite be something that we all have access to.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I'm a big Marvel Cinematic Universe fan, and I would love to have more virtual assistants out there that are like the ones that Stark has put together.
Yeah.
Um, I miss Jarvis.
Yeah, yeah, but they do help to maybe keep that kind of balloon of inflated expectations still inflating, perhaps because you see stuff, you see the movie Her, you see Tony Stark, you see the Spider-Man film, and everything is becoming voice enabled, um, which is interesting to understand how that kind of movies and popular culture and the emphasis on voice technology, how that helps shape people's expectations of what it's like when it's maybe it's not quite like Edith, but you can still get some very good stuff done as we've learned.
I have a favorite slide that I use in certain presentations that are for general audiences, where I have the shot from Star Trek 4, where Scotty is trying to interact with a 1986 computer. And the first thing he does is he sits down in front of the computer and he says, "Hello, computer." Right? And when I'm speaking to it, like I just recently used that slide in a conversation with university students, and I did take a moment to tell them that this was a joke in 1986. The whole point was this man from the future had traveled back in time to 1986 and was trying to work with the computer, and his assumption was that the interface with this computer was voice-based. And then when someone hands him a mouse, which I was kind of shocked at because I didn't have a mouse on my computer in 1986, but someone hands him a mouse, and the first thing he does is he repeats himself, "Hello, computer." He just so then he says, "Oh," he starts with the keyboard. And
That's
so
so good.
it's so the idea of a voice interface to our machines in science fiction and setting expectations for that is not anything new. What's interesting is that it has how far it has come to catch up with some of the portrayals in science fiction, and I'm going to count science fiction slash whatever you want to count the Marvel Cinematic Universe as. um, I mean, we still have I still have experiences every day where my home virtual assistant does not understand what I was trying to say, and
Mm.
sometimes it can be something as sort of in terms of inflated expectations, as expectation lowering as me saying, I think one time recently I said to the one in the kitchen, I said, "Hey, can you create a timer named oven for 10 minutes?" And the assistant said, "Sure, I can do that. For how long?" And I said, "For 10 minutes." And she said, "Okay, I've created a timer named oven for 10 minutes for 10 minutes." And then I realized that the problem is when I said create a timer named, it had taken
Yeah.
an entire string after that as the name. And and that talk about bringing those expectations down, recognizing that
Mm.
doing slot filling based on a template. Um, and so we're not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
But I use a verbal interface, a voice interface every single day in my kitchen. Every
Mm.
day I use that, not for a lot of different use cases, but for a lot of things around the kitchen. I use a verbal interface to add things to my shopping list every day. And when we're having conversations at the dinner table and we have discussion and we're having disagreements about something, we will turn around and we will say, "Hey Google," and we'll get Google to give us information that will resolve the argument.
Yeah.
So some of the science fiction is here.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it definitely is. It's just the beginnings. I know we've used the analogy a number of different times before that it's almost like the early '90s of the internet, where all the web pages are HTML tables and inline CSS colors and stuff, and it's like that's kind of feels like where we are. But then at the same time, when you think about it, the fact that Star Trek was really a super futuristic program, and they were talking to computers, and really that is what we can do today. Wake word
Mhm.
detection works pretty well. Voice recognition works well enough, and classifiers work well enough for those use cases around questions and kitchen timers and call centers. And it's actually the only thing that it doesn't do, perhaps, is it doesn't have quite as much of the kind of like broad and deep intelligence behind the scenes, like maybe as an Edith might do, to be able to, manage the context like a human can, to remember, how a conversation's going and what we spoke about last time and all that kind of stuff. But the actual technology is in terms of verbalizing something, having a machine understand it and doing something. I think we've come on a hell of a long way, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. But you're right, context is the next thing. Even just interpreting the next query in the context of the previous one. What's the weather today? Well, how about Thursday?
Yeah.
Not all the virtual assistants can handle that one.
Yeah.
Um, or remembering stuff about you. I mean, on the web, you used the web as an analogy a second ago. So on the web, we are now in a situation where our interactions with web browsers remember everything we've been doing, right? So the context of what your activity on the web has been follows us everywhere. And that's both to our, to the good thing and the bad. And then all of a sudden you get spammed by an enormous number of advertisements for whatever it was you were browsing about. But the next step in our assistance has to be to think about how we maintain context so that we understand what people are saying in the context of what they've been asking about, what they asked about yesterday, what this person typically wants, and leverage that information, because
Hmm.
otherwise you don't have that personalization. And I often say, like, we want to have we tracking us and knowing us and using that information about us can be kind of creepy in some circumstances, but it can also be working towards that
Hmm.
effortless communication. So I one period of my life, I had a specific coffee shop that I walked by every morning on Fridays, every Friday morning rather, on my way to teaching 4 hours of lab. So for 4 hours, I was teaching introductory programming students how to program. So I got this coffee to steal myself for those 4 hours. And it was always the same coffee. And after a little while, they had it waiting for me
Wow.
on the shelf. I mean, now if you want to do that with Starbucks, you can put in your order and then walk in and get it. But this is before that. This is in the mid '90s. And they knew me and they knew I was going to come by at a certain time on Friday, and they just had it waiting for me, and all I had to do was pick it up and pay for it. And
Nice.
that made it effortless, and it also was a kindness, right? And that kind of knowing the person and knowing their habits, and then anticipating them in that riding that fine line between effortless and creepy
Mm.
can make our lives a little bit easier.
Yeah, yeah. Nice, nice. So I know we're a little bit over, but if we do have time for one more question, I know that Guillaume has been paying attention and tuning in from the very beginning. So if we got time for one more quick question from Guillaume?
The one that I see at the top there about recommendations.
Yeah, this one here around any recommendations on how to do the you were mentioning discovery sessions and doing a lot of discovery to fully understand the business, the customer, the use cases, the intent, stuff like that. Guillaume's looking for any recommendations as to how to do these discovery sessions and workshops, or can you recommend any
I wish
materials?
I could, but I'm not, again, going to say I'm not going to speak for our professional services people who are the real experts in this. I am a listener at some of these kinds of conversations, but I'm not the one running them. So there are methodologies behind that. I just don't have any resources off the top of my head. I'm sorry, Guillaume.
No worries, no worries. So finally, I know you mentioned at the beginning that you are speaking at where's it gone? The Conversational Interactions conference, is it?
Yes, so if anybody is going to be in the region of San Jose, California, next month there's a conference. The Avios Conversational Interactions Conference is on April 12th and 13th, and I'll be giving a talk there about more about interactions and about that human AI assistant, that partnership and that blend of technology. And in general, it's a great conference for hearing more about how, the thoughts around how do we create these interactions that are conversational in nature, not purely transactional, not purely, robotic, but actually natural.
Perfect. Well, the link will be in the show notes. The link to the Interactions website will be in there as well, interactions.com. Do check that out if you are interested in learning more. Any other kind of like resources or areas that you would point people if they wanted to learn more?
Not that's coming up to my mind right now.
No worries. I think a conference and the website is more than good enough.
Okay.
Cool. Well, Lisa, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a whirlwind of insight. It's been really, really, really interesting. Thank you so much. And apologies we've run over a little bit, but I really appreciate you sticking around.
And thank you for having me on. And I hope that all the folks who have LinkedIn there can find me there. Um, and I'm happy to answer more questions if they want to message me on LinkedIn.
Cool. Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you so much. Thank you, Richard, Steve, Michael, Guillaume, and those of you that have been commenting and tuning in. Don't forget the Deepgram webinar that we're doing at the end of this month. Link will be in the show notes. The audio codes webinar that we're doing as well. Link will be in the show notes there. And if you haven't already subscribed to VUX World, where have you been all my life? It's been over 4 years now. All of these, all of these epic conversations that we have with people like Lisa every single week, multiple times a week, and all of the insights that these amazing practitioners and industry leaders share can be in your inbox every single week. So vux.world/subscribe. If you are interested in keeping abreast of the here and now and the future of conversational interfaces. Without further ado, that will be it for today. Lisa, thank you so much. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you again tomorrow when we're chatting to Angel Maria of Deutsche Telekom about how they've actually built a platform internally for their own purposes, which is really interesting. Usually, Lisa, you see companies like Walmart acquiring a company like Botmock, so they bring in technology. Apple acquires Voices, and all of these companies get acquired to bring in capabilities. Whereas Deutsche Telekom, was quite interesting there, is actually they've built their own capability that they're actually potentially releasing out from the company into the world. So it's going to be interesting to figure out what all that's about. Cool. Nice one. We'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you again, Lisa. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.